With a projected range of over 5,000 miles, huge 10-foot tall tires, an airplane on its roof, and the ability to sustain a crew of 5 plus a dog for a year straight. This is the story of the ill-fated Antarctic snow cruiser. So stick around until the end of this video to find out how one of the most impressive vehicles ever made was designed, built, and driven into the frozen Antarctic. It's a story of imagination, determination, and ultimately a lesson in why fast-tracking a really important project isn't always a good solution. With World War II looming, a daring team of American Antarctic explorers set out to establish 2 new Antarctic bases under the direct order of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Leading the United States Antarctic Service expedition was none other than Admiral Richard Byrd, who was best known for reaching both the North Pole and South Pole by air, although the North Pole claim is disputed. In any case, it's safe to say that Byrd was an experienced polar explorer with 2 previous Antarctic expeditions under his belt, but it was his second southern trip that sparked the idea for the immense vehicle that's in the title of this video. In 1934, the American explorer spent 5 grueling months alone operating the Advanced Base Weather Station, but a poorly ventilated stove nearly took his life in the frozen Antarctic. After several unusual radio transmissions from Byrd, the base camp crew attempted to save him, only to fail a couple of times due to snow, darkness, and mechanical failures. Then, on the 3rd attempt, the rescue team, led by Thomas Poulter, managed to get to Advanced Station, where they found Richard Byrd in poor condition. This story ended with everyone getting back home safe and sound after enduring cruel temperatures and wicked winds. But one idea stuck with Thomas Poulter, one of the men who rescued Byrd from his poorly ventilated outpost. You see, the 1934 expedition made use of 3 adapted Citroën half-tracks, one of which was used in the life-saving trip that rescued Admiral Byrd. The problem was the Citroëns often broke down, plagued by water condensing and freezing on the fuel lines. So legend has it that Poulter envisioned a vehicle that could act as a mobile Antarctic base. Enter the snow cruiser. Designed in 2 years by the Research Foundation of the Armour Institute of Technology in Chicago under the supervision of Thomas Poulter, it was given the project number I-69. And then, in the spring of 1939, the US government was preparing a new southern expedition, so the snow cruiser design was presented to officials in Washington who were enthusiastic about the whole project and agreed it would be a good fit for the upcoming Antarctic trip. And so, on August 8, 1939, with a budget of $150,000, that's around $3 million in today's money, construction began on the snow cruiser at the Pullman shops in Chicago. But with a timeline of just 11 weeks to build, test, and deliver the finished product, things had to move fast. And they did. But you need to remember that it was summer and the massive vehicle had to endure the freezing temperatures of the Antarctic. More on this a bit later though. Now for some stats, because it's just that kind of vehicle. It had a length of almost 56 feet, a maximum height of 16 feet, a width of over 19 feet, the 4 tires were 10 feet tall, and it weighed a hefty 75,000 pounds, or 37.5 tons. Those 3-meter tall tires were driven by 4 independent electric motors made by GE, which got their dues from 2 6-cylinder Cummins diesel engines that made a combined 300 horsepower. The Penguin, as it was referred to, had 4-wheel steering, which resulted in a turning circle of just 30 feet, which was impressive for its huge size. It also had independently controlled suspension designed for situations where it had to traverse crevasses, but also for warming up the tires. The plan was to retract all the wheels up into the body when parked and use exhaust gases from the diesel engines to unfreeze the rubber. On top of the cruiser was a specially designed platform for carrying a plane for deep air exploration with a range of 300 miles. As you can imagine, both the Penguin and the plane needed fuel to operate, so inside the 4-wheeled behemoth there were 5,000 gallons of diesel and 1,000 gallons of fuel for the plane. As I said earlier, this whole machine was envisioned as a sort of mobile exploration base, so it had a galley kitchen, living and sleeping quarters for a crew of 5 plus a Labrador Husky, a dark room, a snow melter and a machine shop. It also carried 2 spare wheels in the back. To all intents and purposes, it seemed like the perfect vehicle to take to the frozen south for a whole year. So on October 24, 1939, the nearly completed snow cruiser was ready for action. But this being America, the vehicle was driven, not shipped, over 1,000 miles to Boston. This trip would be the shakedown route where the builders would be able to find any problems and fix them before boarding the North Star ship and heading to Antarctica. With its immense width, roads were closed for its passing, and at one point it drove off a bridge and got stuck in a stream bed for 3 days. Not exactly a good first impression for something that was supposed to conquer Antarctica and go without resupply for a whole year. But eventually the immense machine was put back on the road and it made it in time to the docks in Boston, where the North Star was waiting. The problem was the so-called Penguin was too big to fit onto the deck of the ship. Only after the disassembly of the rear section and insistence from Admiral Byrd himself, the same man from the beginning of the story, the 4-wheeled machine was driven onto the deck. 2 months later, in January of 1940, the snow cruiser was unloaded, but again, disaster was just seconds away, with the heavy timber platform breaking under the weight of the machine. The steady foot of Thomas Poulter, who quickly applied full throttle to get out, was the only thing that saved the day, if only just. The journey from the Bay of Whales, where the vehicle was unloaded, to the Little America exploration base was supposed to be as easy as a walk in the park, considering it was just 2 miles long. But it was here where the Antarctic snow cruiser met its match. Remember those bold tires? Goodyear, the company that made them, believed the smooth balloons would be a good fit for the snowy conditions, a conclusion that came after testing them in swamps, mud and sand. Hardly similar scenarios. Ultimately, the cruiser was nicknamed Bouncing Betty because it was constantly sinking in the snow and skipping and sliding all over the place. Part of the problem was that snow tire technology was in its infancy in the 1930s and 40s, but the tight construction timeline also made it impossible to test the vehicle in the winter. A grave mistake that led to the cruiser's demise way earlier than anyone would have imagined. Because traction was so limited, the crew tried putting on snow chains, but things still didn't improve. The only thing that helped them travel a maximum of 92 miles in a single trip was mounting the spare tires on the front axle and then driving the thing in reverse. Eventually, in early 1941, the cruiser was simply parked and turned into a stationary base, the exact opposite of Thomas Poulter's plan. The massive machine was simply abandoned when the Antarctic Little America 3 base was defunded and evacuated in the same year as the war effort was intensifying. 5 years later, in 1946, the gigantic Penguin was found by another American Antarctic expedition, and it reportedly just needed air in the tires and some basic servicing to get going again. But that never happened, and snow slowly but surely engulfed the cruiser, making it basically disappear. Another expedition, this time in 1958, uncovered it with the help of a bulldozer. After getting inside, the polar explorers reported that everything was stuck in time, with newspapers, magazines and cigarettes still scattered around, as if someone left just yesterday. The 1958 expedition was the last one to ever encounter the Antarctic snow cruiser. And not because it's buried too deep into the snow, but because it's probably somewhere on the bottom of the sea. Some people say the Soviets retrieved the snow cruiser, but there's no evidence to back up this claim. A more reasonable explanation is it just fell into the water after a big chunk of the Ross Ice Shelf broke off near where it had been parked. A 1963 sighting from the US Navy icebreaker Edisto revealed the remains of what seemed to be the Little America 3 station on the side of a floating iceberg. And considering the snow cruiser was parked near it, with bamboo poles put in place to mark its position through the deep snow, It's quite the believable explanation, seeing how there were some poles visible from the side of the iceberg in '63. It's been over 60 years since someone actually laid eyes on the vehicle that was supposed to revolutionize Antarctic exploration. I like to think it's still somewhere in the ice waiting for someone to rescue it, but even if it's still out there, nobody in their right mind would ever embark on such an adventure. The cost alone would be unbearable. So I guess I just have to accept the fact that the Antarctic snow cruiser is most probably gone forever. It was an impressive feat of engineering and it had a lot of interesting tech inside, but it ultimately failed miserably and it became the exact opposite of what it was supposed to be. But I want to know what you think. Would it have been a better vehicle if the construction crew had more time to test it and maybe fit better tires on it? Or was it doomed from the beginning? Let me know in the comments below. I read each and every one of them. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to get notified when I post new videos. And that's it. Thanks for watching.